Belarus seems to have all the attractions of a Soviet-era theme park, a command economy, a fearsome state security apparatus, and elections where the president's victory is preordained. But is the iron grip of President Lukashenko weakening? My guest today is opposition activist and would-be presidential candidate Andrei Sannikov. Is Belarus about to come in from the cold? Andrei Sannikov, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you.
President Lukashenko has been in power in Belarus since 1994. Has the nature of his rule changed over that time?
Yes, it's changed dramatically after 1996, because in 1996 he organized a referendum which actually gave him the absolute power. Because he usurped the power, he destroyed the separation of powers in Belarus, and he started to move very fast and very intensively towards dictatorship that we have today in Belarus.
You've surprised me. I thought you might tell me that actually, yes, there has been some change and that in the last 3-4 years, Lukashenko's rule has evolved and has perhaps moderated.
No, there is no sign of moderation of his rule. There was an attempt to pretend that the system could change, or I would rather say that there was an attempt to send signals to the West that the system could change, that the dictatorship could change, that the dictator could be reformed, but nothing happened.
You see, I want to test that because you are an opposition figure. Your professional life now is given over to telling people both inside and outside the country that there has to be political change. But let me look at the record. I mean, the fact is that the most egregious abuses of human rights, as defined by the international community in Belarus, all came in the period around 1999-2000. That seems to be when his rule was at its most aggressive, shall we say.
No, that was probably because we had the most tragic episodes in our history that disappeared. The disappeared leaders
famous
of the
case of at least 4 people who disappeared.
Yes, at least 4 people who disappeared and 1 person who died under vague circumstances, who was an uncontested leader of the opposition at that time. And he would be uncontested leader in the presidential race at that time.
And you wouldn't dispute, would you, that disappearances have ceased in recent years?
Thanks to our solidarity inside Belarus, thanks to our fight against dictatorship, and thanks to solidarity, international solidarity, including Great Britain.
You run an organization, Charter 97, which runs a very well-known website, and you have contacts both in and outside the country, and the government doesn't stop you doing that.
It's not an organization. We're not registered, and we will never be registered. Besides, I'm now running the civil campaign European Belarus. You cannot register an organization easily in Belarus. Even political parties are under very severe pressure.
They don't close you down.
We don't exist. You cannot close me down if I don't exist.
But you know as well as I do, Mr. Sannikov, that the security apparatus in the country knows full well the kinds of organizations you're involved with, and they, frankly, they could arrest you, they could lock you up, but they choose not to.
That's why the offices of Charter 97 were bursted in recently, and the equipment confiscated, people are being threatened, and my house, my apartment was broken in by the police, and they confiscated the equipment. They confiscated about 67 CDs and diskettes, and allegedly on the pretext of my involvement and my wife's involvement in some criminal case. But they never explained me in what status I am.
Let's look at the political prisoner issue. No doubt there have been political prisoners. I believe there may be at least 1 right now. But the fact is, in 2008, Lukashenko ordered an amnesty for political prisoners. A number of prisoners were released at that time, and the United States government and others welcomed that move and said that they believed it could be the beginning of a warmer relationship between the West and a Belarus government that was, of course, still led by President Lukashenko.
Yes, it happened in 2008 because, and it happened, let me explain, let me be clear on that. It happened only because of the position of the United States that introduced sanctions, tying pertained only to one thing, to release of political prisoners. It was a very morally justified position, and it was supported by the European Union at that time. And only because of that, the political prisoners were released.
Do you believe that your freedom is currently directly endangered?
I believe that it is not safe, and I know it's not safe to live in Belarus. It's not safe to be in the opposition. But we really have to fight our fight.
And yet you have decided, I believe, that you want to, if you possibly can, fight the next presidential election. Yeah. And I note that there are other opposition figures like Mr. Milinkevich who are free to fight, and indeed who have legal, established, registered political parties, his Movement for Freedom party. So what I'm picking away at is this idea that Lukashenko is the last European dictator, that he will not countenance any sort of dissidence or political opposition. That does not actually seem to be the case.
No, it is the case, because yes, we will be entering presidential race, but we will not have access to the most effective media, like TV and FM stations, or the state-owned newspapers that have wide circulation in the country. We know that, and we know that we will not be allowed to be present at the election committees to count the votes, and even international observers will not be allowed to be present in the election committee and to count the votes.
And yet the last presidential election, 2006, the observers from Russia and the CIS states declared that it was free and fair.
Russia for some time supported this kind of dictators international, and were supporting Lukashenko. Actually, Lukashenko is a product of Russia. And they inevitably would pronounce any election of the territory of the former Soviet Union as to be free and fair, although...
so they were, in your view, they were just lying, were they?
There were so many irregularities, because there is a certified body that is entitled to pronounce whether elections are free or fair or not. It is ODIHR, OSCE. And they come and they observe, and their conclusion was the elections were far from free and fair.
Now, you're right in that the OSCE did have some major criticisms of those elections, but what seems to underpin your answer to me is a notion that it is inconceivable that in a free and fair election Mr. Lukashenko could actually win a majority. I would put it to you that there is substantial evidence from inside Belarus that actually Mr. Lukashenko, over many years, has been consistently the most popular politician.
What kind of evidence? You know, the most popular politician in Soviet times was Leonid Brezhnev. Was he supported by the people? It's the same situation in Belarus, you know, because the fear is there.
You asked me to build on my thesis. I'll try and build on it for you. People often vote on what in America they call the pocketbook issues, how people feel about the economy and their own place in it. If you look at Belarus and compare it with other former members of the Soviet Empire, I'm thinking of neighbors like Ukraine, maybe Georgia as well, there is no question that in the Lukashenko years, Belarus has been much more stable, it's been more economically successful, and if you look at per capita GDP, Belarusians are substantially better off than those people in neighboring states. That's his record.
It's a matter of reference point, you know. You compare it to Georgia, Moldova. I compare it to Poland, Lithuania and Latvia.
Well, let's stick to Ukraine then, somewhere in the middle.
Ukraine is a different country. It's
well,
a huge
of course
country.
It's a different country, but it's a direct neighbour.
It's
comparable, and if you look at the facts, the GDP per capita in your country, in Belarus, is 50% higher than it is in Ukraine.
Not anymore. I don't think you...
Well, I just checked the figures for 2009, the last figures that are freely available.
But not anymore.
Your GDP per capita figure is roughly $10,000, nearly $10,000 per person across the nation. In Ukraine, it's something like 6,800.
Yes, it was the case probably in 2008, before the change of gas and oil prices. But you mentioned the word stability. Yes, I could agree to some extent with this, but it's a miserable stability. You know, the level of this stability is miserable. The salaries, the standards of living, the quality of living is very low. So that's why I tend to compare to those who are comparable. Lithuania, Latvia, Poland, because maybe even Lithuania and Latvia. They moved ahead in gigantic steps after they joined or started to join the European Union. And Belarus, believe me, Belarus has the same potential. We have a great potential. We are much smaller countries than Ukraine. We don't have problems like other countries have, ethnic problems, religious problems. And after we acquire freedom, hopefully next year, we will move forward very quickly.
Well, you've begun to make the case there for membership of the European Union, and I want to talk to you about